Hi, everybody. Bryan Norcross here on another Hurricane Q&A here on our Fox Weather stream. I'm here in New York today at the Fox Weather headquarters because we're very interested in what's going on in the tropics with this Invest 94L and potential Imelda and potential threats to Florida, or especially the points north, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and maybe even the mountain areas. And of course, we have another hurricane. We have two hurricanes out there, and we're going to talk about all of that. But we have with us this afternoon on our stream is Paul Delgado, chief meteorologist.
I can barely put a light bulb in.
Yeah, you can do a lot of things, Paul. Paul's a good friend and chief meteorologist at Fox 13 in the Tampa Bay area, and we're streaming, by the way, Paul, on what does it say? Double click to pick a camera source there, Jordan. Jordan Overton is here running the controls with us. But do you see that over top of me, Jordan? It says double click to pick a camera source.
It doesn't go out.
It doesn't go out to. All right, so it looked a little funny to me, but I don't care. In any case, we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube and TikTok this afternoon, as well as X and Instagram and LinkedIn. And anybody there, please send in whatever questions you have. Originally, we asked Paul to be on this afternoon because tomorrow evening, I guess, right, Paul, was the 1-year anniversary of Hurricane Helene. Does it seem like a year, or does it seem like more? Does it seem like yesterday to you?
Well, I tell you, I can drive a mile and a half from my house and I still see damage. I mean, it's an ever-present, really anyone here along the west coast of Florida within a half a mile, you can still see significant damage. So it's a constant reminder of what happened. We had, I think, in Hillsborough, which is the county that Tampa is in, and then Pinellas, which is the county that St. Pete is in, we had over 18,000 structures with major damage. Mm-hmm. 18,000. Yeah. And over 450 that were completely destroyed. So there's no escaping. And it's only been a year. So it seems like a long time. But then when you drive around and you still see the damage, it feels like it was yesterday.
Yeah, but in the ninth that it happened, of course, landfall was that night, so it was earlier that day and into that evening, right, that the big storm surge came in. How would you describe the reaction of people? Was it shock that it really could be that bad in the Tampa Bay area? Or the forecast was pretty good. Were people ready based on the forecast?
Yeah, I think it was really a lesson. I mean, I've been doing this here in Tampa for 36 years, and it really was. We say over and over, and you do the same thing. It's always about the water. Mm-hmm. It's always about the water, and it really is. And I think Helene,
unless it's Andrew, and then it can be about the wind.
Right.
But yes, but almost always, you're correct. Yeah.
Almost always. Yeah. And for the most part, we haven't had a setup like this. Helene passed about 150 miles west of us, never made landfall here, made landfall up in the Big Bend. And when you go on TV, I think when you say to the viewers, the winds are going to be 120 miles an hour, everyone goes crazy. I mean, everyone's going, 120, unbelievable. Then you say there's going to be a 7-foot storm surge, and people go, that sounds like it could be pretty bad. And I think people realize the 7-foot storm surge is a huge, huge deal. And I kind of wish that I was on our roof here at the TV station screaming as loud as I can that 7 feet of water is a big deal. And I think that's something that we really learned. And, some people have evacuated that didn't need to evacuate. And I think no one's complaining. Everyone now understands. And it was really on kind of piggyback to what happened with Ian. So everyone here saw what happened down at Fort Myers, and I think everyone now really understands, the power of water and what water can do.
Yeah, what storm surge means when they're talking about it. I mean, that's not a common English term, right? We talk about it all the time, but for normal people, when does that ever come out of anybody's mouth? The words storm surge. I mean, it's just not. It's not normal.
Yeah, and we told people we told people to leave. And, I even in my inbox on social media, on my Facebook page, where that night, I've got to the point now where I get a lot of messages during storms, and I whether it's a thunderstorm in the summer or unfortunately a hurricane like Helene, I had probably 25 or 30 messages in my inbox at midnight from Helene, from people that stayed on the coast, Madeira Beach, a lot of our nice beaches, begging for help. Can you send a reporter to come save us? We're upstairs and we can't get out. I mean, and you talk about feeling helpless, but all you can say is get as high as you can and stay away from the water. But there was panic, and a lot of people between 11 o'clock that night and 3 o'clock in the morning messaging me saying, can you come save us? And that's the scary part.
Yeah, and I hope that in the Tampa Bay area and also in North Carolina, in the valleys there, not just in Asheville and Chimney Rock and the places that the cameras go, but there are lots of places that were devastated in North Carolina. That the culture requires that we put up kind of a totem pole that says this is where the water was in Helene, so that there's nobody that can doubt that. Oh, now I see where the water was, and in Tampa you could put here's where the water was in 1950 and 1921, and if you really wanted to, you can put in 1848. When downtown Tampa was underwater.
They had that in the Biltmore. I think on the Biltmore in Asheville, where you would walk, there's a big like gate that comes in,
right. Mm-hmm.
brick, and when that all receded, I think their big flood was 1916.
1916, right?
And you could compare the water from Helene to 1916, and then it's always like when you're there, you always look around and go, you mean to tell me the water got here?
Yeah,
right there,
exactly.
right there, up there. That's where the water got, and you can't even believe that could ever happen. And I always tell people water goes places that you never think the water is going to go.
Yeah. And I hope they do that. There was for a long time a lot of pushback. The real estate people didn't want stuff like that. I mean, I've been talking about this kind of thing for a long time. Same thing with evacuation zones. That let's put the evacuation zones on the stop signs or the street signs, where you put it's a red 2 or something like that. This is a red evacuation zone. If you're a tourist, you go out and look at the street sign. You know what evacuation zone you're in. And people that live there come to learn, but the real estate people did not like that. But I think that culture is changing. That people want to know. And I hope that as a result of what's happened here over the last few years, that we have more response from responsible people to just make their citizens aware of what the potential threat is. It's not like we've never had storm surge in Tampa Bay, or not like we never had a flood in Asheville or those valleys there. Right. The 1916 flood was almost identical to this, caused by a very similar 1-2 punch kind of thing. So anyway, these things can happen. Let me go over here what's going on today, because I know we're going to have a lot of questions. We'll be happy to talk about Helene as well, and your memories of Helene. So, okay, so here we go. And what we have going on out there is, first of all, we have Hurricane Gabrielle heading for the Azores tonight. Unusual, not unheard of, but unusual for them to get a hurricane. It's going to be tonight our time, tomorrow morning in the Azores. And here is the growing tropical storm Umberto, is forecast to be a hurricane here relatively soon, and a strong hurricane, as a matter of fact. Forecast to stay offshore. Of course, Bermuda is going to have to watch that. And then we have the system that we're watching, because this one is forecast to move north through here. The question is, and the reason we have this big development area, is it's not clear exactly when it will develop, when it takes this path to the north. So here's what's going on in the weather pattern, and what you can see is high pressure here, and notice there's kind of a gap in the high pressure between these two cells, so there's not much to steer the tropical storm Umberto now, so it's not moving very much. And this one, the invest here, is rounding the end of this high, and the ends of the high are always very weak. So we just don't have much steering going on for these things. Let's go forward in time. We're looking up in the upper left here at the day. This is now on Saturday, so that we started on Friday there. Now we go to Saturday, and it's this dip in the jet stream that's going to come into play. Very strong dip in the jet stream, causing all this nasty weather all the way from the Gulf Coast all the way up to New England, including here in New York, and kind of an upper level low that's going to come into play as well. But not yet. So it can't, this is too far south and too weak to get scooped up by the jet stream there. So we see here on Saturday maybe a circulation starting. So that's our first opportunity, looks like, to get a tropical depression out of this thing, either late Friday or Saturday. All right, now let's go to Sunday. Now we're starting to get some scooping action going here. And now we see Category 3 hurricane over here, forecast by the Hurricane Center. This is the European model, which is a little farther south because the Hurricane Center uses an average of models. So in this case, it can be a little different than the European, and so we'll see a little difference there. But for this one, we're tracking the European model in this situation here. All right, and then we go on to Monday, and now things start to change because this low pressure system essentially captures in the European model the tropical system and is wanting to pull it toward the Carolina coast. And that's what the European model is saying. And you can see the hurricane here. The Hurricane Center's forecast is north. The European model keeps it farther south. But again, the models kind of are diverging because it's farther in the future. And when we look at all of them, there is pretty high confidence that it's going to end up in here somewhere, but then they diverge. A number of them go there, and a number of them go there, and Umberto goes in front of it and kind of pulls it out, and all of that goes because of this big dip in the jet stream. The one that was over the East Coast kind of heads on off into the North Atlantic and moves it out. So we get this bifurcation in the possibilities coming up about Monday-ish. Beginning of next week. So for now, we're just going to watch it in the Bahamas. All right, let's take a look at what the details of it are right now. 30 miles per hour is the estimate from the Hurricane Center. We can see it's pretty robust. Big thunderstorms going with the thing, but the center of it, look at the wind flow here, and you see it going up and like that. And so the biggest turning is up in here, and that's why the Hurricane Center puts the X up there. But it's involved with these mountains over Hispaniola. So as long as it's near those mountains, uncertainty reigns, but they give it a 90% chance, you see, of eventually developing into a tropical depression. There you see on the radar, it's now moving away from the radar in Puerto Rico, so we're not seeing all the rain, but you see they're very strong thunderstorms, kind of a banding look. So it looks like it's trying to get organized. So there's that development area close up, exactly where we're not sure it's going to develop. A number of the models actually develop it down here pretty far to the south. All right, so let's just track it here in the model and to get a feel for how these two things are forecast to interact. There we see the deep greens are the moisture, and both of them have moisture, obviously, and we see the wind flow around the system. This one is a circular wind, and this one over here, the left one, is just more a kink in the wind. In other words, kind of a wave in the wind, a tropical wave. All right, there we go, Friday. It moves into the Bahamas now. Maybe we're starting a circulation tomorrow. That's a maybe. A better chance on Saturday, more of a circulation here. Notice we have good distance here. Yesterday we were talking about maybe these things were going to interact in some kind of impossible to forecast kind of way. But now the thinking is the distance is maintained far enough that we don't get a direct interaction. All right, Sunday, it starts to move north. Now it has a healthy circulation. Could we have a tropical storm by that time? Yes, we could. We could have tropical storm Imelda. Could there be effect on the southeast coast? Yes, there could be, but we're not expecting a a dramatic storm, but be aware that from a boating standpoint or activity standpoint, disruptive standpoint, possible Sunday in southeast Florida. All right, then moving north, and now this is the European model, and the European model is the one, remember that dip in the jet stream coming along, it is pulling it to the north and then wants to take it in to the Carolinas, Georgia, somewhere up in here. And you also see, very unfortunately, with this kind of setup, look at the moisture in the mountains here, including western North Carolina down to Georgia, upstate of South Carolina, all the way up into Pennsylvania. And when we get that kind of moisture in the mountains, it can really cause significant flooding problems. This is not going to be, no sign of this being a Helene, but you don't have to have the worst case situation to be very disruptive. So that's where this all stands right now. Paul, any further thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those cases where you're just kind of waiting for it to get going. I mean, this is really, Bryan, has been, a hurricane season where we're just kind of waiting for something to happen. I mean, because up to this point, that trough that you showed has really helped to turn everything out to sea. I mean, there really has yet to be a situation where we're looking at something that is going to be making landfall. Now that we have the first one, we have the usual questions, until we get a well-defined center and a storm that's always, anytime a storm comes up from the south and is paralleling Florida, any slight deviation in track exaggerates where it could theoretically make landfall. It doesn't take, 350 degrees and 10 degrees makes a big difference when storms are kind of paralleling a state.
Yeah, and especially when it hasn't formed, as I like to say, when a storm is undeveloped, just developing, or moving slowly, and this one kind of checks all three boxes. Or you could add to that, involved with mountains, especially 14,000-foot mountains like this one is, then the forecasts are subject to large errors and likely to change. That's kind of a rule of forecasting.
As far as the viewers here in Tampa Bay, that the number one question I'm getting, Bryan, is any chance of this getting into the Gulf? And I say, well, I mean, it's developing. It's not a 0% chance, but it would have to take something really wacky in the atmosphere for this to take a big left-hand turn and get into the Gulf of Mexico.
We wouldn't expect that. All right, so we have lots of questions coming in from lots of folks. So let's go ahead and get right to them. Jordan is in charge of the questions.
We'll just get right into it. Both TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, everybody's asking some of the same questions. They want to know about impacts for the area. Let's first start in South Florida. We have a bunch of questions from South Florida, Miami. What's the thinking there?
Well, it does not look like some kind of big hurricane hitting South Florida, but as I was saying, Sunday, if the forecasts are right, could be disruptive in South Florida. You'd be on the west side of the storm unless something, again, really unexpected happens. But let me actually go back here, Jordan. Let me just take this 1 second and go back. And I have to get out of this for a second and just go back on that graphic a little bit and bring it down to here. So according to the European model, the thing is, when you look at something like this, you have to imagine it being closer to Miami, or a little farther from Miami, or a little farther north, a little farther south. I mean, this is an approximate position, right? So if it's a little closer, yes, it could be a windy day and a rainy day, and you could have moisture coming in. But the left side of the storm is generally the weaker side of the storm. So we would have to say that potentially disruptive over the weekend, but not dangerous, except from a boating standpoint. Or
don't want to go on a boat to Bimini.
Yes, exactly. You don't want to go to Bimini.
That would be good.
That would not be good. You want to keep the boat secure. But other than that, not seeing a risk for South Florida at this point. But with the caveat that every time we have a storm that is weak and developing, and we're looking at one model, although this is a consensus of the models, I'm showing you that one because in the short term, or at least up to Monday, this is really the consensus that it's going to head north and be offshore of South Florida. Jordan?
All right, so our next question we'll kind of get into, let's talk a little bit about North Florida. Paul, kind of up there towards Tampa, and then Jacksonville. We'll kind of work our way up the coast. Any thoughts on that?
So, Paul, looking at the European model here, it looks like some kind of a front coming toward Tampa. I mean, we have a very complicated weather pattern because we have this developing tropical system, but we really have a very robust dip in the jet stream pushing a front south. What's your forecast for Tampa for late in the weekend? Are you going to have any weather change? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Ever present over our state. Typically, what happens when these hurricanes pass east of us and go up to the Carolinas or go out to sea, late September, early October, a lot of the times it ends our rainy season. We don't have an official end date where the rain just stops, but it usually is some sort of weather event. It could be the first cold front. It could be a passing tropical system that all of a sudden brings a north wind, and the dew points here in Tampa get into the low 60s, and that almost always pretty much ends the daily rain for us.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking at here as far as direct impacts to Tampa Bay. I don't really see much at all except that north wind. And up in Jacksonville, it's kind of interesting how that part of our state, Daytona Beach, Jacksonville, for whatever reason, because of the shape, always seems to kind of miss everything. Everything. Yeah. It's hard to get anything landfalling in Jacksonville. It's always a little to the east or a different spot.
Well, it's hard to get something to landfall in Tampa too, until recently when there've been a lot of storms on the West Coast. But Tampa or Jacksonville, I think the last landfall was 1964, right? Hurricane Dora. Has there been? Have I missed something in between? I don't think so. Yeah, and there used to be
coast of Georgia.
Yeah, well, the coast of Georgia. Yeah, I mean the storm of record in Georgia is 1898. I mean, it's a long time ago. All right, Jordan.
All right, next question here coming in. Let's get to a little bit farther north into Georgia. Will this impact the Atlanta metro?
Well, not initially. Look at, again, the map here. And remember, the green is the moisture. So if the European is right, through Monday, it doesn't show it coming that far west. But the problem is that if the European, remember I talked about this bifurcation potential. One is it gets to about Monday somewhere off of North Florida or something, and then takes a hard right out into the ocean. And wouldn't that be fabulous? The other is that it goes up and it sits or something, and then it goes inland and just kind of settles there. So nothing would happen in Atlanta with this, I wouldn't think, except for the possibility of rain. And the odds aren't high of that, and it would be sometime next week. We just have to see how it develops. I think Atlanta is going to be not the problem area. More likely, if this scenario develops, it's going to be more likely in the mountains of South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia.
You just don't want it to get trapped. You don't want it to get, move west, get up into the Carolinas, and then, a high pressure builds in, and then it kind of spins until it winds itself down. That can be problematic.
Yeah, that's what happened in Helene. Besides the fact
it was a long-lasting rain event.
It was a huge, Helene had so much more moisture because it was so large. Right. So this is not a Helene scale thing, and had been so strong. This is not a Helene scale event, but still related, unfortunately. Jordan?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit. You guys just kind of started to talk about it. Question here about here in the mountains near Asheville. Please tell me this is not coming our way. A couple of TikTok comments also from Charlotte, North Carolina, wondering the rain part, a lot of moisture over the area. What's the concern there?
Yeah, so, just looking at the map we're showing right there, and remember that the darker the green, according to the European model in this case, the more intense or more deep the moisture is in the atmosphere. There's just more moisture to rain out in the atmosphere. And you can see that you have, in advance of the storm, and this is an interaction between the tropical system and a front and that upper level dip in the jet stream, upper level low pressure system. is showing at this point heavy rain potential across the mountains, including the Asheville area, including up into West Virginia and the mountains of Virginia, Roanoke area, and so forth. In terms of Charlotte, I mean, yes, it's a moist flow coming in and maybe a little windy in Charlotte, but I wouldn't expect.
You see those, if you look at the map, the live, the animation you have up there,
right.
Brian, you can just follow the little wind arrows, and you just follow, they kind of literally rise up the mountains, and,
right.
we call that technically orographic lifting, but that rising air is really what kind of wrings out all that moisture, and the arrows kind of blowing right into the mountains is one of the reasons why you can have a big rain event.
Yeah. Jordan, I don't know if you can make my maps where I can draw on them in this mode, but if you can do that, that would be a wonderful thing. Oh, there they go. Okay, all right, great. It's just you have to kind of kick the machine and then it works. So Paul was talking about, here comes the flow of moisture in like this, and then it's up over these mountains here. These mountains are providing lift for the flow, and that creates rain. So this is the band of rain I was talking about. And yes, unfortunately, Asheville and Western North Carolina would be in that if this was exact. We're talking about, today's Thursday, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, talking about 4 days in advance. So slightly different orientation on things, and maybe the wind flow isn't there, and maybe the system comes north up into here somewhere and then heads out that way, and
that's a whole different ballgame.
Whole different ballgame. We get fringed here, yeah. So we're talking about possibilities here, but it's unfortunately the European model is not the only model that's presenting that possibility.
It's pretty good consensus on a potential big rain event for the Carolinas.
Right, exactly.
All right, our next question. Let's talk a little bit about back to Florida a little bit. Cruises. I've had a couple questions come in. I have a cruise coming up this weekend. Tomorrow, especially this person here, is going to the Bahamas until Monday. How much rain? Is the cruise going to get canceled? What's the cruise impact?
Boy, that's a good question. I mean, I would think that in fact, I know 100%, being a Miami guy, that the cruise industry is looking at this very hard, because if we end up with something like this, here we are Sunday, and you have the potential of a tropical storm over the northern Bahamas here. So they're not going to want to be messing around with that. It wouldn't be dangerous. The cruise ships are well equipped to deal with high seas and so forth, but who would want to be on a cruise in a tropical storm? And they can't generally dock.
You and I maybe would want to be on it.
Exactly.
For scientific purposes.
Interesting for a minute, right.
Yes.
But the cruises can't dock at like Coco Cay and Bimini and the other places they go because they don't have the protection and whatnot. So I'm sure they're looking at it, and I would say that there's a decent chance they'll get diverted. They'll go different ways.
West.
Yeah. They might go down to the Keys or do something different. But stay in touch with your cruise line and see what they're going to do. But I guarantee you that they have their folks looking at this really hard.
All right, next we're going to talk a little bit farther north. We talked a little about the rain for North Carolina. How about Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic? What's the thought on that?
Well, the moisture is going that way, Yeah. Now, according to the model here, there is dry. There's just dry in there. What is your secret there?
Yeah, screwed it over a little bit.
A little bit. Okay. Go ahead. You have the magic handle on this thing. Sort of. There we go. All right. So this is all dry air here, but let's not, put that in stone, because it really depends on exactly how this moisture flow works and how far north it surges. Remember, we had that dip in the jet stream. So traditionally, those dips in the jet stream, just like right now today, the moisture is coming all the way from the south, all the way to New England. So exactly how that dip gets involved with this moisture is uncertain. I would say the odds are higher that there would be rain at very least, and maybe wind off the ocean in Virginia than not, if this scenario plays out, as opposed to that dry tongue that the European model is forecasting there. Paul, you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so we're showing Monday and today is Thursday. We kind of know in the back of our minds that this probably won't verify exactly correct, but what it does give us a sense of is just the big picture, the big setup, the nuances we just don't know yet because it's just too far out. But I will say this: I mean, there is at least the potential of this being a significant weather event for the Carolinas, and whether or not we're talking about a major, let's say major landfalling hurricane, but a landfalling hurricane somewhere in the Carolinas is a big deal. Whether it's Myrtle Beach or down the road in Charleston or up towards Wilmington, I think that's something that the folks of the Grand Strand of Myrtle Beach and whatnot have to think in the back of the mind right now that there could be significant weather impacts for them at some point, maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week.
Yeah, and let me add one more thing. We're only going to Monday here. It actually gets more complicated if you go farther in advance. But the farther in advance you go, then you have even less certainty, right? But this thing here, this hurricane is forecast to swing. Something. I drew that badly. I don't have good facilities here. All right, is forecast to swing something like that. And then if this ends up here, so you end up with this vast area of low pressure in here. So all this is low pressure from these storms. Up to the north, you have a big high pressure system building over the eastern part of Canada, Canadian high pressure system. So in between, the wind will, if all that comes to pass, will scream from the east here all along this coastline, along the Jersey Shore, along down to Virginia, on up to New York and points north. And that's a very moist, persistent flow. And it's just nasty, kind of nor'eastery kind of weather. Now, the ocean temperature is still relatively warm, so it's not a winter time kind of thing, but it's potential for widespread ugly effects after Monday. I mean, I stopped it at Monday because it just, becomes...
And the whole forecast is complicated by the fact that Umberto is out there.
Yeah.
And I think that there could be interactions between the two storms that we don't know yet. And it could influence the track of what should be Imelda. It could influence the intensification of what should be Imelda. So it's hard to talk about that because how these two systems interact is really something that we just don't know yet.
Or what I was talking about before, just a moment ago, the systems are not really interacting, but because there's a huge high pressure system and they're low pressure, they can kind of together cause a significant wind flow into the coast, which is what, if I were to run the European model out farther, is what it indicates, by the way. All right, what you got?
Yep, so another thing we're going to kind of bring up, we're going to go back to Florida. I have a couple of different questions coming in. First, this one, of course, some are asking about Miami specifically, but on TikTok, I have a couple of questions about will this rapidly intensify over the Gulf Stream? If it does, will it expand, and now Florida all of a sudden gets a bunch of impacts as it goes to the north?
Well, will it rapidly intensify over the Gulf Stream? I would put a maybe on that. It is over very warm water. There, over the Bahamas, just over the Bahamas. If it's right over the Bahamas, the water is extremely warm because the Bahamas kind of traps the water, and even when the wind blows, it doesn't stir it up very much, and it's not that deep, and so it's extremely warm there. So there's a lot of fuel to get it going over the Bahamian Islands. And north of there, the water is plenty warm, and yes, there's the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is a little bit to the left. So the Gulf Stream comes here from the Caribbean, goes in here, then around there, and then right between Miami and Bimini, and then it's close to the coast, then it gets a little farther off the coast. So, and it's not just a line, it's wide. So yes, this thing is going to be able to tap in to the Gulf Stream, and there is high pressure building over it, which is a conducive kind of pattern according to the models. So intensification looks likely. The consensus is category 1, 2, is somewhere in there. But could it be stronger? Absolutely. I mean, cannot at all be ruled out.
Long list of storms that we're looking at, and all of a sudden, they're a lot stronger than we ever anticipated.
Than
So anytime you
forecast in
get,
the models.
yeah,
Yes, yeah, exactly. So yes, it could be stronger. Now, the effect on Florida, the stronger the storm is, if it's just offshore, you have effect. But unlike when Helene came up here and the wind came like this and pushed that water into Tampa Bay, in this case, we're going up here, and now we have the wind coming around this way. So it's not a storm surge situation so much for Florida, although I hasten to add that if it gets close enough in here before it goes up, and if it's strong enough, you get the Jacksonville flooding issue down the St. John's and so
Right.
forth. But that's, if it gets stronger, that would not be, I don't think, a South Florida issue, but we can't rule
it'll be
that
interesting to see what happens when it pulls away from the islands and
Yeah.
it gets up towards the Turks and Caicos and what it looks like. A lot of times you say, what's the structure when it moves away? I mean, if it's well defined and it has a well defined area center of low pressure, then the odds of rapid intensification go up. It's what it's going to look like tomorrow and Saturday when it begins to move into the Bahamas.
Yes, exactly. And so, I was raising that question of with the tall mountains on the Dominican Republic. This is really a typical Caribbean island kind of scenario that we don't really know what conditions the system is going to be like when it gets past. I mean, I've seen hurricanes run into the Dominican Republic and essentially fizzle out,
Right.
get seriously disrupted. Now, in this case, we don't have a hurricane, and we have a robust disturbance. It looks like the core of the energy is moving by to the north of those islands, but that's not really 100%. And so until it clears the islands, we're really not going to have a good feel.
When we're looking at satellite tomorrow and radar presentations, we'll have a pretty good sense of what we're dealing with when this thing begins to move away.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much. I mean, it's the upper level pattern favors intensification. The waters are certainly warm enough, and if it does have a well-defined center, we'll see how quickly it ramps up. But the thing is, it's going to be over water for a long time. It's not as though it's going to move off and all of a sudden be on land in 2 days. So it's going to have a pretty good window where it can intensify.
Yes, exactly. So it should be mostly by this time tomorrow, mostly over the water, or at least over the water enough. And then later tomorrow into Saturday, that's when we have a decent chance of getting into depression. But the Hurricane Center makes this big area because it really is uncertain. It really depends on how disrupted the system is by its trek over the mountains and with the mountains. So an interesting question I see there, Jordan, from Gabrielle about preparing. Do you see this? Should I start preparing? I don't know where Gabrielle is.
She is.
We don't know, right? But I would say this: if I were along the Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina coast, you're seeing here the potential of a threat Monday. So it really depends on how long you need to prepare. I would certainly be thinking that, okay, I'm going to watch it tomorrow and get ready to spring into action on Saturday. And, of course, listen to whatever the local instructions are and whatever the information is for your local area. But you just have to be thinking about that. If it were to end up right where that X is.
Jacksonville.
On
Gabriel's from Jacksonville.
Saturday. Oh, okay, from Jacksonville. Well, in Jacksonville, think back to Irma. This is not an Irma thing because that was such a huge circulations as we saw with Helene, make more storm surge. But storms, or think back to Matthew, maybe. Think about the storm surge and the fringe effects of some of those storms, depending on where you are in the Jacksonville area. Should always be ready to know what you're going to do if the power goes out. Be sure you're in a safe spot. And
It's also worth mentioning that today's Thursday, so a lot of the potential intensification would be happening over the weekend.
Right.
So a lot of people, during the weekend, don't pay attention to stuff. It's all about, it's the weekend. I'm going to go play and have fun and before you know it, it's Monday morning. Then you really haven't paid attention to the news or the weather. But the thing is, this is a weekend where, beyond enjoying the time off, is also worth paying attention to the weather up in the Carolinas. sure.
Yeah, and we keep getting questions about Miami. We've talked about Miami and South Florida a few times, but so we're not expecting, bottom line is we're not expecting a direct hit in Miami, but we may have disruptive weather. It looks like that would come on Sunday. And it looks like conceivably, I wouldn't be surprised if we had enough of a storm that there were power outages and so forth. Probably not widespread, but it doesn't take a whole lot to knock some trees into power lines and so forth if it gets persistently breezy. And it doesn't look like by Sunday it would be moving especially quickly, but it seems like it would be moving at that point. So, this is check back in tomorrow and let's see. But as of now, we're not looking for a high concern event. This might very well be a bring the furniture off the balconies in your high-rise event,
right?
However, because it doesn't take a lot of wind to blow things around. You don't want to cause problems for that. But anyway, we'll see more on that tomorrow and Saturday. It wouldn't be until Sunday on the current schedule to have effect.
In the meantime, it's checking every single model run between now and Tuesday. As meteorologists, we're in that mode now where what's the 0Z, what's the 18Z, what's the 12Z, and we spend a lot of time now just analyzing every run that they.
Yeah, and we look at. Let me see. It wouldn't be updated yet, but I can show you the tropical threat graphic that we have. I think I can, Jordan. Hang on, let me do it. It's down at the bottom. Let me go down. Here we go. So what this does is this takes the European, the GFS, and the Google AI model and says, okay, what can they tell us about where the system, this doesn't say anything about intensity. This is all about just location. Where is there likely to be a system with a circulation? And what you can see is for the for this one, the Invest or Imelda, that it's all in here, that this is the most likely place based on the afternoon runs of the model that it's likely to be, and this is where it's likely that Umberto will be. So this is through Tuesday now, you can clearly see the most likely direction. Now, there's still possibilities in here. These blues are like 20%. And you ask about Miami. Look, Miami is into the greens. So the greens are up here in this 30 to 40% range of possibly having at least tropical depression effects. So that's why we're saying maybe disruptive weather, but the odds are that the system would be more offshore, but certainly potential disruptive effects there.
It's good graphic right there.
On the coast. Yeah. So we just given the success of the Google AI model, the DeepMind model, we thought let's include that and that this was the most successful.
I tell you, the site that's available for the public, they have that. It's so well done, and it's really a great tool. I mean, you're
talking about the Weather Lab site.
And it's added to my bookmarks. And we have the Fox model here, and we've been looking at the Google AI presentation quite often the past year.
So a little hint: if you go to weathernerds.org, which is Matt Osterling's site. Matt works at the National Hurricane Center, actually, and he gets the Google AI the same way we do, directly. So it gets posted there before it gets posted on the actual Google Weather Lab site, and actually they're working on that. But in any case, there's a place you can get it earlier in the afternoon if you're looking at what's called the 12Z or the morning run.
Yeah, the animations are really cool too, to kind of watch how the little ensemble models kind of spread out.
Right, and which tells you just the intrinsic uncertainty of looking at these models in the far future, and a change with the models now that didn't used to be with the European model, which is traditionally still very good, but traditionally it was the best. Now we have. Actually, the consensus model is generally the best, although in Aaron, the Google AI model, did spectacularly well. But it used to be that what we call the European model, the one I was showing you, that one was a higher resolution. They put more into it than all these ensemble models where they run 50 different versions or 51 different versions. But now they're all the same resolution. They're all basically the same model. So it's not the thing to look at is this dispersion of them. And that's what we're showing here. We're showing, when we look at the European, the GFS, and the Google AI, that's 130 different representations, and then we look in there to see what the odds say based on that 130, and that's what this tropical threat graphic is here.
We'll get one last question here, Paul. I know you gotta head actually to the 5:00 newscast, so we'll get a question kind of here for you. Is there any possibility that 94L gets pushed under Florida into the Gulf?
We don't think so. I mean, as Bryan and I were talking about this before, it's like it's not a 0% chance, but something in the atmosphere would have to happen that would surprise us.
So there you're down in the 5 to 10% chance of just having an effect. I mean, this is not a Gulf impact kind of situation.
Right. If it all of a sudden rode along Cuba and somehow get into the southeastern Gulf, that would be a shock. I mean. It would go against the way the atmosphere is positioned right now. It's a trough in the southeast, and there's much more of a chance of it going out to sea and not making landfall in the Carolinas than there is of it getting into the Gulf. That would be a much higher probability.
I agree. All right, Paul, we're going to let you go. I know you have the 5:00 news on Fox 13.
Brian, always good seeing you, buddy.
Yeah, you too. Be well, and let's hope the storms stay away from the west coast of Florida this year. In fact, let's hope the storms stay away from everywhere this year.
Yes.
All right. Take care, Paul. Good to see you. All right, we'll continue on here if you guys like, and if you have any questions. We have lots of folks writing in from all over the place. What do you have there? Okay, let's see. What kind of effects will we have here in Augusta, South Carolina, North Augusta, South Carolina? Well, in South Carolina, it really depends on a lot. Let's look at this once again and go forward here. And we get to Monday, and this is one. Let me see if I can actually, Jordan. There's no way. No, what I need to do is I want to move. I want to move the camera there to be able to show South Carolina more clearly. Yeah, if you want to just move it down.
Okay, you should be able to move it. Hopefully,
now we can do it. Yeah. Oh, okay. So all right. So just look at the way that this is set up. So what's happening here? We have two things going on at the same time. One is we have tropical moisture moving north here, and the other thing is we have this low pressure over here that's kind of pulling things north this way. So we have all this moisture that's up here already, and on Sunday you can see that we have, South Carolina looks a little dry here for the moment, but here, let me just move this back and forth and watch the green. Watch the green kind of move. And you can see it kind of moves up into South Carolina as we go here. So this would not be initially, this looks like it has the potential to be, let me put it that way, a 1-2 punch kind of situation where we have this preliminary moisture that's caused by the tropical system plus other systems, and then the tropical system after that. So yes, we have the potential of heavy rain and wind and so forth in South Carolina the way it is developing, but this is all potential for next week. But the rain could arrive before that, maybe even over the weekend on top of the rain that we've already had. I don't know about in North Augusta, but I know it was raining earlier in Asheville. Our Robert Ray was reporting from Asheville in the rain.
All right, next up, let's talk a little bit about Orlando. We've had Viv and a couple of others asking from that area.
So Orlando, may very well feel effects of the storm if this forecast is correct and it tracks up along the East Coast and there is high consensus, you can see that the moisture wraps around and would affect the Orlando area. You can see that. But it wouldn't, and could get quite breezy and so forth. But we don't see at this point any kind of direct effects in Orlando that would be in some sense threatening, although you may be disruptive. It looks like, based on this timing, that's Monday afternoon. So let's back up a little bit and see when the moisture kind of arrives in Orlando. Well, of course, there's moisture. It's just been a moist situation. So yeah. The tropical moisture kind of arrives there Sunday, it looks like, enhancing the chance of rain moving in from the ocean, more likely in Melbourne, Daytona Beach, New Smyrna, so forth, but moving west over I-4 looks like right now on Sunday.
Another one coming in. Let's maybe talk a little bit about what the potential impacts would actually be if it did. I have a couple questions on TikTok as well. They're wondering, is this a storm surge thing? Is this a wind thing? Is this the rain? What's the main impacts?
Well, this is an everything. If we really end up with a Category 1 or 2 hurricane making landfall up here in this area in somewhere here on the coast of North Carolina, South Carolina, or Georgia, on the right side of the storm, that's going to push the water up into the coast, and the storm surge is the factors that affect the storm surge. One is the strength of the storm. The more wind you have pushing on the water, the more water comes. Another is the size of the storm. The idea, if the storm isn't terribly large, then it can't push as much water. The bigger the diameter, the more water it pushes. And another is the angle to the coast. Now, if this model, the European model, is right, the angle to the coast is square on. So that's maximized. So then we have just the wind and the diameter of the storm to be concerned about. And yes, this is a storm surge. This is potential for severe weather, tornadoes inland, if the storm moves north, all the bad things that come with hurricanes, flooding, rains, and so forth. So this is a point to have this possibility in your mind in the Carolinas, maybe the Savannah area as well. The X would indicate that Savannah would be on the wraparound side, the left side of the storm, which would not be the storm surge side of the storm, but it's just too far in advance. Certainly, if you had a cone with this, it would include Savannah. At this point, we'll also include Wilmington and Charlotte and so forth.
Yeah, it actually,
and we'll include
Hilton
Head, obviously.
Yeah, Hilton Head.
Yeah, so, if this thing does something like this, and the other, if you were just tuning in, the other option is before it gets to this location close to the coast of the Carolinas or Georgia, it could suddenly take a right and head out to sea and follow Umberto out to sea. There's this very much fork in the road in the various computer forecasts, and now we look at these groups of computer forecasts called ensembles, and the groups, the one group, like for instance the Google group, took most of them into the Carolinas, more or less like this, or Georgia, and a smaller group out to sea. This afternoon, it's the larger group goes out to sea, and the smaller group goes this way. But in the European, the bigger group goes inland into the Carolinas and the Southeast and Georgia and so forth. So that's why we say there's this fork in the road, and if it goes out to sea and you get yourself thinking about this, then you say, oh, thank goodness. But we want, because there is a reasonable chance that something bad is going to happen here early next week, Monday into Tuesday, in that area from North Florida up to North Carolina, then we want everybody thinking about that.
A great question coming in from TikTok. It's kind of a two-pronged. I wish I could show up, but either way, the question is, when the cone is issued, What do you think it'll look like? How far north is it going to go? Are we going to see a cone in Virginia? Are we going to see a cone in Maryland, New York, New Jersey? What are you thinking as far as the cone?
Well, if the cone gets issued, remember the cone is for 5 days. So if the cone, let's go back here. So if the cone, let's say, so the cone will get issued when it becomes a tropical depression. So if it becomes a tropical depression sometime, let's say, if, tomorrow maybe is the first opportunity based on this, or maybe early Saturday. So let's say this is early Saturday morning. I mean, what we see there looks like a pretty healthy circulation, right? On Saturday, here we go to noon on Saturday, and let me see. Is it gonna let me?
I'll put it in pause for you.
All right. All right. So there it is, noon on Saturday. It almost certainly looks like have a depression because we'd have a circulation. That's all we need for a depression is a closed circulation. So that's Saturday. So then we're going to have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all the way to Thursday. Well, what I've been showing you is only to Monday. So then the question is, where does a hurricane center think it's going? Because if by that time, and we should get better forecasts and more consistent forecasts by that time, because once the system forms, then the models have something to lock onto. But if it takes this path, then we could see some kind of cone that takes it up to the up into the Carolinas and loops it over the southeast. Could be one of those kinds of things. We don't see any scenario where it goes up the East Coast because high pressure is going to build over the north, and that would stop it from going directly north. So if it looks like it's going to go inland, then it's probably going to be one of those cones that turns and twists over the southeast. If it looks like it's going to more likely to go out to sea, of course, then we'll see that reflected in the cone, and the cone might fringe the coast on the chance that it goes farther north before it turns. But we're going to wait. We're going to probably have to. Well, we're going to have to wait till it's a tropical depression. Well, it could be a potential tropical cyclone. Remember, we have this other designation that if the Hurricane Center is thinking, so this could happen tomorrow, that they would want to put up tropical storm watches for the Bahamas, or if the Bahamians want to put up tropical storm watches. The Hurricane Center doesn't put them up for the Bahamas. The Bahamian Met Service puts them up. Then we get a potential tropical cyclone, and we get a cone. So we get a full forecast. So that could happen tomorrow. And and then the Hurricane Center is going to have to make a forecast and decide whether they think that the storm is more likely to turn inland and be a real threat there in the southeast, or more likely to turn out to sea, and that'll be based on what the consensus of the computer forecast is at that time.
All right, let's talk a little about something we haven't talked about yet. What about the hurricane hunters? Didn't check yet from Kyle. Didn't check yet, but when will they be sending in the hurricane hunters?
Well, they've sent out the jet. They did that today to check the atmosphere around the system. So what they do is they go out and measure all around the system, and they put that in the computer models, and that way they have a better understanding of exactly what the steering currents are. And that improves the computer forecasts up to 10% or so, and we'll see that reflected in the computer forecasts that we see tomorrow morning. In terms of the actual hurricane hunters, let me look here and see what the latest is on that. I'll answer your question. Let's see. So what they say is maybe they're going to go tonight. They've got a lot of flights scheduled, so they have NOAA flights. Yeah, so synoptics are, and tail Doppler. Yeah, so it looks like they're going to go tonight and check it out. Let me just look and see if there's anything going right now. Well, they have a plane heading out there right now from Lakeland. It's just about over Lake Okeechobee, right now, so it's heading in that direction. So we'll get some Hurricane Hunter information here later on this evening, and maybe they're sending a NOAA plane out there with a tail Doppler radar so they can really look and see and analyze the system more clearly than just the typical Hurricane Hunter's planes.
We spoke about it earlier in the broadcast, but for some of those that are just joining us, this is Sean, cruising from Baltimore to Bahamas Sunday. Will this affect us?
So the answer is yes, it'll affect you, because it's not only, of course, that you have this disturbance, this potentially melda here. You also have this hurricane out here, right? So this is going to put a lot of energy into the water, and if this turns into a Category 4 or 3 or 4, it doesn't make any difference. There's a lot of energy emanating from this. So yeah, this is going to affect your cruise. Again, the cruise lines aren't going to do anything dangerous. But it's going to be a bumpy cruise, I would think almost certainly, just based on Umberto, unrelated to whatever happens with potential Imelda.
All right, let's talk about South Florida. If the track keeps pushing west, I also had a comment about that on TikTok. They said it seems like everything shifted to the west all of a sudden. But if the track keeps pushing west, can South Florida be impacted?
So South Florida, it depends on what you mean by impacted. South Florida would be unusual to not be aware there's a storm there, in the fact that it gets a little windy, gets a little, at least breezy, that feel of tropical moisture that you get when you have a tropical system nearby. So if you look at it right here, you're going to have to show me how to do that. How do you put that thing in pause, Jordan?
Yeah, just to move it over.
I'll put the pause right here, and then you can...
Oh, you have to put a pause.
Yeah, put a pause and then put it in play. There you go. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So if you think about it being here, look at this tropical moisture feeding in to South Florida here. So, soupy, not that it hasn't been, by the way. I just came up from South Florida, and it's been just rainy and ultra rainy since... When did that all start? In late August or something? Anyway, it's been a horribly rainy September, and it looks like this would continue. This does not look like, there could be a pretty significant storm offshore here, feeding moisture in and bands of rain in. Looks disruptive, but not, like a direct hit kind of scenario. Now, are we 100% sure that it's going to stay offshore? Absolutely not. Well, if you were watching a little while ago and you looked at this tropical threat graphic here, you can see on the tropical threat graphic that over Miami you see these dark blues and maybe greens. So you have that 20% chance of having a storm in the vicinity there that could have a more direct effect, but we wouldn't expect, in a paralleling type scenario like this, wouldn't expect a full-blown hurricane or something like that. At least the odds are much higher that it wouldn't be that, and a small chance that something really unexpected happens and the thing just swings farther west and develops over the Bahamas in some super robust way, and you have a storm coming from the south up the coast. That's not the indication there. You can see on this graphic that the odds are high that it's in this band here, that this is where the system tracks. Then, because it's farther in the future, it becomes less certain what's going to happen here. Does it go out to sea, or does it come up into the Carolinas somehow? That's uncertain, but the odds are significant that the worst of it stays offshore of southeast Florida.
Okay, so everybody get your questions in. We got a little bit more time left. Let's go ahead and talk about North Carolina a little bit.
We have a new adviry.
I was going to say, we have a 5 p.m. Let's see.
Well, we have a 5 p.m. from Umberto. So let me just check here. It's still 60-mile-an-hour storm. Still forecast to be Category 3. So no significant change with Umberto. Very similar cone that we've been talking about, and very, very similar to our threat graphic here. The cone looks more or less like this here. So no big change. We don't have any new information on the invest. That'll come at 8 o'clock. But of course, if they think there's a circulation, they'll go ahead or they'll put out the potential tropical cyclone if they're going to put up the watches and warnings. My guess is they would not do that till tomorrow.
So that's great. Good information, Umberto. We got a lot of questions, comments about North Carolina just in general. Maybe we could just kind of talk about the state, what we're looking at.
Yeah, so we have significant concern for North Carolina at this point. There's two different issues in North Carolina. Let's go forward again here, and let me see if I get it there. All right, Jordan, do your magic. And I need to move it. So, yeah, do your magic, Jordan, so I have control of that. I'm going to learn how to do this one of these days. All right. Jordan, over here, see if you can help me so I can move this thing.
Yeah, there you go.
I see.
All right, now you can move.
Okay. All right, so let's look here. So actually, I need to go forward in time here, and let me put a...
Just space bar. There you go.
There we go. Okay. All right. So now we can see. So you can see here that if something like this happens right here, and we end up with a hurricane positioned here, the dangerous part of the storm is going to be on the North Carolina coast. Now, obviously, the errors 4 days out are significant and bigger than normal because this storm hasn't even developed yet. So, whether the worst of this is North Carolina or South Carolina or out to sea, those are all options at this point. But a scenario like this is bad in every part of North Carolina. Eastern North Carolina gets the storm, the hurricane, and Western North Carolina gets the moisture that gets pushed up against the mountains, and you get enhanced rain. And so if something like this develops, there's going to be a lot of talk in North Carolina about threats. And this is Monday. So this is already on Monday. So this would begin Sunday. So the discussions are going to be underway. But it's really going to take, we need to get another day here at least so something more develops, and hopefully there is less diversification in the models that unfortunately we have right now.
Okay, next, kind of running out of time a little bit here. We'll keep it going, but I did have a couple questions from people on TikTok actually wondering how they can keep in the next few days. They want to keep updates. Obviously, we've talked about we'll have more data. How can we watch the next few days?
Well, you can go to foxweather.tv, and it'll tell you there whether you want to watch on your phone, your iPad, your computer, your TV. Fox Weather is available everywhere and is available for free, and it's on all day, all night, every day with updates. And of course, I'll be here updating. Also on foxweather.com, I write every day, and also on my Facebook page, and we also publish YouTube videos when a storm is threatening. So you have all those different options for watching, but for kind of continuous up-to-the-minute coverage, go to foxweather.tv and learn how, depending on what kind of TV you have. You have a Samsung TV or an LG TV or a Roku or what you have, whatever you have, DirecTV, whatever it is, Fire TV, it'll tell you how you can watch the Fox Weather channel, which is a free, continuous channel with updated information about all this. And of course, this is our big story right now. This and of course, tomorrow being the anniversary of Helene, we are very, very conscious of that and what folks are going through in Western North Carolina and in the Tampa Bay area and around the Panhandle of Florida, that's all ongoing, of course. And it was wonderful to see today, by the way, how Asheville is coming back. I mean, there's still it's still a terrible situation for many people there, but they are bringing Asheville back, which is a wonderful, wonderful city. If you haven't been there and you're in that area, go support them, because they need people to know that they are indeed coming back. So, Jordan, should we wrap it up for today? And we'll see what we're going to do here the next few days. We may just do this again, kind of out of schedule. If this looks like this is going to be a threat, I'm sure we will. So, watch your Facebook, X, your Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram. Where do I put all this stuff? Put it pretty much everywhere. So if you just follow me on those various platforms, I'll let you know if we're going to do this. And of course, we'll talk about it on Fox Weather as well. So, all right. So we'll see you live on Fox Weather, and we'll see you here the next time. And stay in touch. And everybody, please stay informed and tell your friends to stay informed, because this is a situation that's going to change kind of rapidly here, and it could be dangerous for a good part of the southeast coast. All right, everybody. Have a good evening. Take care.